Good morning, everybody. It's September 11th, 2021. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz. It's This Week in XR. We've got a great show for you today. Kevin Kelly, founding editor of Wired, author, and a great philosopher about both technology and the human condition, will be joining us for a chat. The news this week, rather thin, not that nothing happened, but of course, Facebook has sucked all the air out of the room again with the launch of its Luxottica Ray-Ban branded smart glasses. Some call them AR smart glasses. That would be generous because there is no display. But it is filled with all sorts of bells and whistles that we've come to expect from audio smart glasses, the likes of which we've seen from Bose and Amazon. And I own a pair of them, and you know, I probably wear them this morning when I take my dogs for walks. So they're not nothing, but they are expensive if you have a prescription. But they're certainly growing in popularity, and Facebook wanted to throw their hat in the wearable ring. So here we go with Facebook AR.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is one of those natural evolution points, which I think when we get to our interview with Kevin, I think we're going to talk a lot about some really interesting topics. He's a very interesting guy that has deep thoughts about this stuff. So I'm excited to get to that. But you're right about the Ray-Ban Facebook announcement. Just like you, I use my Bose frames on an almost daily basis because I love the fact that I don't have to have anything physically in my ears, and they work quite well. This is sort of a blended combination of that and a little bit of what the Snap spectacles were. There's your Bose glasses, right?
Yeah, I mean, they look kind of like regular.
Yeah. The advantage about the Ray-Bans is that they are extraordinarily light and extraordinarily nimble. And for those that are wearing them that you know had the press, the ability to talk about it in the press, the Verge guys, you and others, they feel exactly like regular glasses, which is sort of the point of there's technology in there. There's two cameras that take pictures and can do video recordings, and there's audio and video, and you know you can use them as essentially headphones. But the form factor dynamic of they start to feel like something you'd wear, and not just wear for 5 or 10 minutes, they start to feel like something you'd really wear, is this natural evolution to when we get that visual component right, that next wave of spatial compute starts to become extraordinarily real for a much larger group of people than just the early adopters and enthusiasts. So I think it's an important step forward, even though it doesn't have the visual part yet.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how long they hang around. I don't think, you know, Snap spectacles are still kind of a footnote. Mm-hmm. And let's see what happens with these. Facebook is very good at making noise. Yeah, and they emit continual noise, and I don't know if that's a sign of too much PR, doing too many things at once, or them being the most productive company in the world.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the fact that they are making progress and not just, you know, toiling away in the lab and not releasing stuff, they're toiling away in the lab and then putting things out there that they think are going to be relevant to people. You know, I was a big fan of what they did with the portal and the concept of that ultra wide camera that can track people in a room, but it just never caught on, right? In some cases, they may be actually too fast and they forget how to deliver the story on something because they're constantly pushing the envelope. So it may lead to other companies finding that right cadence of things, right, to deliver. So it's an interesting thing.
Let's take the airtime away from Facebook and turn it toward Kevin Kelly. Kevin is a man after our own hearts because he is not only a futurist, but a pastist.
Absolutely.
Kevin Kelly, welcome. Kevin is the founding editor of Wired and one of their featured contributors. He is a great mentor to many and a friend to all. He's written 7 books, Kevin, and is now working on a large-scale photography project, which I'm anxious to hear more about. Kevin, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So we just, as we were in pre-roll, we started to talk about the photography book. So let's just go with that.
Yeah, I did, for 50 years, I've been photographing remote parts of Asia and the disappearing cultures. And that's between Turkey and Japan and Siberia in the north and Indonesia in the south, 35 countries. And I put them together into a paper book, very retro, which weighs 26 pounds and has 1,080 pages and has 9,000 of my best images of stuff that is basically disappearing very fast. And it's a kind of cornucopia of design ideas, alternative ways of doing things like clothing and costume, how you might arrange your house in the old ways. And it's kind of like a time machine, looking back in a time when people made everything themselves, basically by hand. And so I did a Kickstarter to fund the book and getting it printed. And I'm just wrapping up the last bits of it, which is the book is so heavy and so big, it needs to have its own shipping box from the factory. And they're just not used to something so heavy, because each time we try it, drop tests and stuff, it gets damaged. So I'm working with package designers to try to make something that works. And I finally got the help of Nathan Mervold, who's another, makes these incredibly huge books, the same kind of like this one is. And he's been helpful in designing a package that works. So that's where I am. And I'm very excited by this. It's called Vanishing Asia. And it celebrates differences and otherness, other ways of doing things. And my little wrap on that is, just to finish, is that in this very super hyper connected world, wealth and beauty are generated by thinking differently. And as we are more and more connected, it gets more and more difficult to think differently. And I see this book and the kind of travel to these remote places as a device and a way to help think differently, to have different ideas about how to do things and what has been done in the past. And so this for me is useful as a prompt to think different. And that's how I would present it.
It's interesting that you mentioned the super heavy book scenario, because and then you tied that maybe unexpectedly to the tagline, think differently, because the other super heavy book that I got, you might know where this is going, that came to me in a very special shipping container, was the Iconic book, which is all the Apple hardware, the sort of history of Steve Jobs, Johnny Ives. And it was so heavy and so big that it had to come, it was a gift, and it had to come in this special delivery system where you had 3 boxes and you had to open it up to get to the big box. So I'm aware of that. And then the other thing is, for a pretty long period of time in my working life, I traveled tremendously around Asia. So China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, et cetera, and Thailand and other places, and got deeper and deeper into the culture, as obviously you did. And my discoveries were about food, people, and imagery, right? And that living that life, you get a very interesting sense of the first blush of a culture and then the real culture beneath it. So it sounds like you're on that journey, showing that to the world, what your experiences were.
Yeah. I mean, Asia is the future. I'm married to a Chinese. My kids are bilingual. Most of my livelihood in the past decade has been giving talks about the future in Asia. And it's very, very clear, just in terms of the arithmetic, just in terms of sheer numbers, between China and India alone, there's 10 times the number of people in the US. And so it's almost, no matter what happens, no matter what the politics are, this is the momentum of the people hustling there are going to move forward, and they're going to continue to rise. And so the future, I think less and less what the United States thinks about the future, it doesn't really matter that much. It's really what they're thinking about the future that's really going to matter. Yeah, and so that's one reason why I go there, is to hear about the future. But at the same time, the best way to understand the future, you kind of have to have a sense of the past, because these things at the civilizational scale just operate at a different time scale, and they take decades and maybe even a century to work out. So I go to to China, Asia, to look not just at.
So anyway, yeah, back from our power disruption.
What I
a
was
very
saying,
third
right,
world
what I was saying, right,
experience.
is what I was saying, right, as you broke off, Charlie, was that for folks like us and many others, Wired has been such a northern star for us in terms of how we build our universes, right? And maybe there's.
I distinctly remember the moment I picked one up and I looked at it and I looked at the design of it and the table of contents and I said, oh my God, finally there's a magazine for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, it was so in the moment.
The assignment that the kind of, there's often you're making things, you have a kind of a internal heuristics. Our internal heuristic was we wanted to make a magazine that felt like it was being mailed back from the future. So
well, it worked for us.
We weren't going to explain everything. We were just going to say, here's what it is, and you're going to have to keep up a little bit. So and so that worked. So that I like to try and continue to do that, is to pretend that we kind of know what's happening as a way of trying to discover what's happening.
Yeah, it's still highly relevant to people like us, extraordinarily relevant.
Well, I think one of the things that was really a breakthrough with Wired, and in particular your work, Kevin, to put it plainly, is the humanism in it, right? We're not really talking about technology, we're talking about humans, and we're talking about the future of man.
Right, exactly. We would say Rolling Stone is really not talking about music, it's talking about the culture of music, and Wired is about the culture of technology.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the culture that arises around technology, because in writing my second to last book, What Technology You Want, I realized that culture is a technology itself. Mm-hmm. It's something that we invented out of our minds, and things like calendars and laws are also inventions, right. And they are soft technology. And so our etiquette, all these things, even ethics, are things that we invented. And so they are extensions of technology, and they're as technological in a certain sense. So we need to pay as much attention, because you can invent all kinds of things, but no one's going to use it. Why? Because there's other things, other technologies, soft ones that we've invented that will make a difference.
Right. So there's a question I've always wanted to ask you, Kevin. You've been writing about this for 50 years now. Are you surprised at the way things have turned out?
Yes. And I'm surprised for several levels. One is at a basic level, I think one of the hallmarks of reality is that it's going to be surprising. It's improbable.
Right.
Every single creature, every single species on this planet is improbable. Our own lives are improbable. And the more improbable they are, the more authentic. Okay. So everybody has some unique mix of things. And if you're just trying to imitate someone else's life, you're not gonna arrive at where you really should be arriving. You should be arriving somewhere that's for you, unique for you, and that's going to be improbable. So yes, I'm surprised because reality is going to be surprising. The second way I'm surprised is because lots of things that I expected didn't happen, and things that I did expect to happen did not, and so that's surprising as well. So there are certain things that I was not surprised by, and there are certain things I would be very surprised by if they didn't happen in the future. But there's going to be plenty that will surprise me.
Ted, same question for you, by the way, Ted. Are you surprised?
Well, I was gonna ask Kevin, hone in on that a little bit. Over the last, let's call it now, close to 2 years of the pandemic, what would say are your 2 or 3 biggest surprises that kind of bubbled up into your universe and went, wow, I didn't expect that? That's an interesting.
Well, at the very least, Chris Anderson and I had discussions 2 years ago, I guess, or January, when COVID the first reports came. we were both skeptical that it would grow. I mean, so the first surprise was that it turned into the scale that it did.
Yeah.
Because initially it was like SARS. It was like, well, how many people is this really going to affect? So that was, so fundamentally, yes, I'm shocked that it reached the level that it did.
Yeah, I think we would be in agreement with that. I remember watching all the events that I was supposed to go out and, be a speaker in the real world. South by Southwest was that first one that I was like, there's no way they're canceling South by Southwest.
Right.
600,000 people go. And then, of course, that was the first domino. And then after that, they all started to fall. And it was like, wow, the world is changing very dramatically.
Right. So in that sense, I was wrong about my initial predictions about how far that would go. The second one was, I would say the politicalization, the anti-vax thing surprised me because it kind of exceeded what's the word I want? There was a resident anti-vax movement all along. It has always been, which was very mixed. It was kind of some new agers. It was not very political in that sense.
Yeah. And
so the way that it became kind of a political badge was a complete surprise to me. And it could have gone either way, and it has, we can see it in other countries of the world. Most of the places haven't gone the way the US has in terms of its signaling and its symbolism. So that was something I would not have predicted. I worked with Salesforce and a bunch of other Deloitte. We did a bunch of scenarios at the very, very beginning to kind of imagine what all the different scenarios could be. And the whole purpose of doing scenarios is not really to predict the future, but it's to not be surprised by it, right? And so because I did those scenarios, a lot of what's happened since is not surprising. And because we thought, well, that could have happened because we went through all the possible things that could have happened, including these rebounded things and all these other effects of the biological aspect of it. But there are still social things that would not expect it, like the degree of the anti-vax thing was something that we did not think of in the very first scenarios we did way back.
Yeah, I think it's because there's an innate sort of illogical sense to it. So people that have logic in their brains, regardless of their concerns or their worries about something, you're just basically, putting two things on a scale, right? And you're saying, well, one has been sort of proven that it works and there's very low incidence of anything that is dangerous happening. And the other is proven that if you don't do it, your incidence of being in a very dangerous situation are much higher, right? So it's kind of like wearing a safety belt in a car. Like, you understand that there's a very small percentage of people that wear a safety belt and something bad happens and you can't get the safety belt off, but it's a teeny little percentage, right? Whereas wearing the safety belt or having the airbags, yes, sometimes an airbag goes off and it burns you, right? Because it goes off incorrectly, very small percentage. But the overwhelming percentage of it helps you save your life and others around you. And therefore, that is kind of how I think most people viewed the vaccine. But there's a sector of people that just completely go the other way. And that was very, I think, surprising to me as well. Yeah.
So,
interesting topic.
So we're going to move this conversation to the metaverse.
We'd like to, if you're okay with that. It is the topic du jour.
Okay. There's so much to say about it. Where do you want to begin?
Well, the first thing I'll say about the metaverse is, haven't we been talking about this the whole time? I sort of feel like a bunch of people walked in the middle of the conversation and said, what are you guys talking about anyway?
Yeah.
And so, and then there's been, all sorts of ways to claim it and spin it and plaster it on everything.
Yeah, it's fine. I think.
I mean, it's like, you want to have this conversation now? Okay.
Yeah. I think what it is there was some sense that this was the name that you want to call it. Naming is important, and that's something we learned at Wired. And so this is an attempt to try and give it a name and another boost. And I don't, it'll come back. We'll have another round of this where.
Remember cyberspace?
cyberspace, yeah, you know,
And the World
VR.
Wide Web,
Right.
you're connected.
Exactly. But I think there are some things happening now that are making clear to me. So I've had my son is like a lot of young people. He's doing NFT art, right? He's doing art and NFTs and stuff.
Mm.
And I think there is something in this convergence of the XR world, the VR, the augmented reality world, and games and crypto. That the three of them, I feel, are converging into something. So you know, I've been talking, and as well as you have, about the kind of the augmented reality world, the VR and AR and XR and all that, and that's slowly going forward. But there's the gaming world, which has never ceased and continued to expand. And then there's this crypto fringe. There are a bunch of true believers who see this as a remedy for all kinds of things. It's not really clear how it works. I mean, socially works. But I feel as if it does feel like there's that the three of them could converge in a way that is very, very important.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that convergence, right? And as we think backwards to look forwards, there's always sort of those three pieces, right? And you mentioned that crypto is sort of the wild card, or blockchain is the wild card here, you know, and here's the other two with the gaming world and the sort of web interconnected world. Mm-hmm. And we can go backwards and find those three moments in time at a moment when sort of, you know, the CompuServe chat rooms were sort of in existence and AOL started to happen. And we can look at Netflix as a moment where that's sort of part of what the metaverse did from an entertainment standpoint. There's always these three pieces that sort of come together, and there's one little oddball that becomes like the fire starter, right? The third piece of the puzzle. So it's interesting.
Sure, yeah.
Your perspective is that.
And in the terms of the internet, that was the web. I mean, the thing about the internet was bulletin boards and all that kind of stuff. We could see it coming. It was off to the side. It just wasn't work. And when the World Wide Web came along and became visual, it was like, aha, that's the ignition. That is what everybody could kind of identify. And then it just took off. It was ignited and it just exploded. And I think we're not quite there yet with this things that we're talking about, this world. But I feel as if perhaps the convergence of games and blockchain crypto inside of them, or whatever, running the ownership issues, have that potential to produce something that might ignite it.
Right, agreed. And I think there are parts that are definitely there, as if you mentioned, if we look at Roblox or Fortnite or Minecraft, or, you know, the world of Grand Theft Auto, is pieces and parts that are both creatively successful and economically successful. Look at Pokemon Go, creatively successful, massively economic successful. Those other two pieces are starting to gel: the NFT side, the blockchain and tokenization side, the spatial sense of it. Sure. Gelling up, just like the web gelled up after the other pieces started to show their power, right?
Right.
And so before you knew it, everybody had to have a website. Yeah.
I think where crypto can come in is this the issue of I mean, the beauty of the web was that anybody could make the website. You can make your own website and put it up, and that was what made the web. It wasn't that AOL and all these big companies were going to make all the websites, although they believed that they were going to do it. But it turned out that no, everybody in their bedroom is going to do it, and that was the beauty of it. So right now, with kind of a metaverse world, a shared consensual virtual world, is that it's doing that has been it's still difficult. It's still difficult to actually generate that content, and the economics of it are not clear as how that would work. But if you could use crypto to some way distribute that ownership so that someone who spent a lot of time making something, and it's not necessarily like a world, they may be making an artifact or something that can spread in the world. And if they could retain some kind of credit or get some income for that and have it as it spreads through the world, then you have this huge amount of energy and effort into making the world and to making it, because everybody could, I'm making my version of it and I'm not going to rely on Facebook and others to make it. We're going to make it in a decentralized way, in the way that the web was. And so crypto has the potential to maybe figure out how you could be creating this in a very decentralized, distributed way, and taking care of the IP and taking care of all the other issues you would have in a decentralized world of how do you prevent spam, how do you authenticate and authorize that this version should be there. And so so I think the kind of the crypto bros that are out there making all this stuff, and I think the thing about crypto is that it's completely distorted by the amount of money being made. The thing you always want to ask about the NFTs is, well, would anybody buy these if their value went down?
Mm-hmm.
Like most things. And everything else in the world, if you purchase it, it's going to decrease in value over time. That's the natural state. So including art, most art does not increase in value. And so if NFTs did not increase in values, would they be useful? And there's some parts of them that would be. And I think that's—
How so?
How so? Well, because the idea of that if I resell something, some of that resale should go back to the original creator.
Oh, I see.
That's an incredibly powerful
Right.
mechanism.
Right.
If you have a world in which you're making things and they spread, and each time something is sold or passed on or used, you as a creator get some little kind of credit. That is big. So that's built in, and that's part of one of the kind of options you have for most of these NFTs is that kind of future sale. And so I think things like that are worth paying attention to.
Lots to talk about. We could probably go on for hours, right, Charlie? But
and we do. So let's end our short chat together on a high note, Kevin. When we set up this set up your talk with us, we talked a little bit about optimism.
Yeah.
Right. So are you optimistic about the future? Is this all going to turn out okay?
Yes. I'm more optimistic about the future than I've ever been. And my optimism comes mostly from the past, from history, from the data. So I have an evidence-based optimism. And the evidence-based optimism is if you look at the world rationally, squarely, impartially, progress is real. I was just watching a history thing on Netflix about the Romans, and it's like we are so lucky to be alive today, and the things that we don't have to experience. So a lot about what we should be optimistic about is all the things that did not happen to us in our lives today.
That's true.
The fact that that a 12-year-old did not die of COVID, or that we weren't robbed on our way to away from home or of all our surplus. So there's tons of things.
Human history teaches us that life was uncomfortable, and often you didn't have enough to eat and you were cold or wet. Yeah. So I would say we've come a long way. What was the philosopher who said life was nasty, brutish, and short?
Right. It was short. It was the average age until science was 35.
Yeah.
Okay. So none of us we'd be here. So I'm very optimistic about the future, and I think we actually have a moral obligation to be as optimistic as we possibly can, because the world that we want is complicated to have a world that really works and serves us, and is a world that we want to live in. And to do that requires us to kind of imagine it first. We actually have to try to imagine the world that we want in detail, because it's impossible that we're going to make that world inadvertently.
I think we largely agree with that thesis. I think that the three of us here would say, you know, we are optimists by nature. We see that most things are designed for the good of humanity, and the things that go down the dark roads tend to be edge cases. They can be very, very bubbled up and represented now because of what we do with technology and how aware we are of the dangers of humanity. But for the most part, I think both myself and Charlie largely agree with that theory, that technology is an optimistic progress. Science is an optimistic progress that leads us to better places as humans, as a human race and a human culture. I think we agree.
Right. And in the long term, it's the optimists who are going to design the future.
Right. That's a great way that's a great button. The optimists design the future.
Right, exactly. So I mean, it's kind of like the world's like a car, where you have you have pessimists who are the brakes, and you have the optimists who are the engines, but you need brakes to steer. Okay, so but you just don't want to let the brakes take over.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's really good.
Right, because you want to drive forward, but we absolutely need people to say, stop right here. Okay. But it's important that the optimists are driving forward. And so the other thing the optimists embrace are problems.
Right. Solving problems.
I believe that problems propel progress. No problems, no progress. Problems are actually literally propel us because they identify new opportunities. Okay. And so we can, as optimists, we can embrace problems because those are new ways of doing things that we hadn't thought about before. Yeah, they're going to force us new ways to do things and move forward. And so, so yes, there's plenty of problems in the world, but I'm a protopian, not a utopian. And protopia is about the fact that if we can create even 1% more than we destroy every year, we can compound that 1% to make civilization. So when we look around, yeah, 49% of the world may be crap, may be terrible. And that 1% difference is hardly even visible except in retrospect. Mm-hmm. Okay, so yes, you're right. There are lists of things that you have about how the world is wrong. Is correct, but in the protopian world, we only need 1% more. That's better to be optimistic.
That actually does make me feel optimistic. Thank you so much for starting off my weekend the right way.
Me too. Totally. We forget sometimes how far we've gone and how much we've created and how much humanity has done in such a short time, you know, over the last 100 years, that is remarkable in so many ways. So
it is. We have to face up to progress.
Yeah. So I'm going to end the show with an anecdote about you, Kevin. The first time we met, I said, "Kevin Kelly, oh my God, I worship you. I imitate you." And he goes, "I know."
I don't remember that. I don't know what I would mean by that, but.
Well, we would call that flattery.
I would call it flattery. Anyway, Kevin, great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. And
you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.